Welcome to the Cart Barn. This week, we have a real treat for you guys. We have two old timers that have been around the state of Alabama for a long time playing golf, being club pros and touring pros, and just a real good treat. Elvis Larkin and Charlie Krenkel.
I haven't played with Elvis, but Charlie's one of my regular playing partners now. And if there's anybody that knows anything about golf from the 70s and 80s and in Alabama, it's Charlie Krenkel. He high-level professional, knows everywhere to eat in the state, the best places to eat. He
In the Southeast.
he almost qualifies as a sports writer in that regard. And he's great. He was a great player back in the day. Had a cup of coffee on the tour, and just was a legend around the mini tours down in Orlando back in the '80s. So it's going to be great talking with those two guys because not only are they good friends, but they've got the needle to each other also. So it's going to be great to hear from them.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I grew up as a young kid out at the club with Elvis as the pro. I think he showed up there when I was about 9, roughly, and been friends with him for ever since. Played a lot of tournaments with him. He witnessed my first hole in one, and he said, that might be close," and it was. Just a really great guy. Through him, I've got to know Charlie and played a lot of golf with both those guys. I'll tell you, for those of you that don't know Charlie and Elvis, the reason that you need to listen to this podcast is because they have some stories. And we didn't even get to cover them all, and won't cover all of them on this episode. We'll have them back on again, but they are a hoot. So thanks for listening, and we'll get right into this week's podcast with Charlie Krenkel and Elvis Larkin. Welcome, everyone, to the Cart Barn. Today, we are joined by two legends in North Alabama, Elvis Larkin and Charlie Krenkel. And I'm so excited to have both of you on the podcast. Lifelong friends of mine. Elvis was my childhood professional, and got to know Charlie through Elvis. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
I'm
to be
sure
here.
There will be no embellishments in today's episode, and just try to keep it clean.
That brings it to an end already.
So
We're both pretty good with keeping the language clean till we get on the course.
so
Yeah.
When did you guys meet, and do you remember the first time you played against each other?
I remember the first time I played with Charlie. We played the Spirit at Burning Tree, and we started on number 10. And Charlie had a real bad start. He hit it out of bounds on 10. Then he messed up on 11. And his attitude got real bad. And
he's not talking about me.
And I had to calm him down. I said, we got a lot of holes left. And he ended up playing really well after that. And we ended up being really good friends. And I played one. I got back from Vietnam, and I ended up playing for Athens State over there for a little while. I played at Florence before I got drafted, go in the Army, and we played. I think we played
match.
Might have played 2 matches, and then when I moved to Birmingham, I got to go eat his mother's fried chicken a lot down there. We got to be real good buddies, and a lot of fun. And played a lot of golf. When he would be back in town from playing the mini tours, we'd play either Pine Tree when I was working out there, or Birmingham every once in a while. We played Birmingham Country Club on John Guston's last day at work. We played him, David Hancock. We had a good time down there.
We had a lot of good memories from especially those times when he was at Pine Tree, and just about every Monday there'd be a group that'd go over to Birmingham Country Club and play. Sometimes John would be there, and people like Nuge,
Yeah.
Nuge and
Wayne Nugent, he's the club manager.
We'd always have some really good games going over there on Mondays.
Any money change hands on those Mondays?
It wasn't large amounts
No.
with us. There's some other people that had the large amounts going, but
Yeah. Frank Shackles out there. Somebody always want to come play him for money. And we ended up, when we played at Pine Tree all the time, but Frank came in there one day and I just been there about a year, and the course was closed on Monday, and they let us play, and we mostly all pros, Rich Santagata and Charlie if he was in town, and sometimes Bo Bowman would come who was at Inverness and guys like that. And we had a guy named Steven. I can't think of his first name. His daddy owned Tasty Bread Company, and he liked to gamble. And he wouldn't play anybody but Frank.
Tommy Stevens.
Tommy Stevens, yeah. And
Bread Man, we called him.
Yeah. And then Frank goes in. We had a valet parking guy that got killed out there. A caddy shot him. We had caddies back then, and they ended up getting rid of all the caddies, and they got rid of the valet parking guy. And Frank goes in there about a week after the guy got killed and had a gun and went in the pro shop. I mean, in the office building, the pro shop was closed, looking for Elvis. Said, I'm going to get rid of him today. And they stopped us from playing out there. And
rightfully so.
Yeah, scared those girls to death.
One of the things I'm sure Elvis will agree with is that being around John Guston was probably the most influential thing on both of us as growing up with golf and learning golf the right way. And there was nobody compared to him to be around. It was such a fabulous mentor. Anybody that was ever around him would probably agree about the same thing. He was phenomenal, and I'll always be thankful that we were able to be around him in our early stages of golf.
He's special.
What made him special?
His love of golf, mainly.
Yeah, love of golf. But he was, and Elvis probably knows a little more about this because he did work over there at Birmingham Country Club for a while, if you can call it work. But John was in the color guard and
Military.
Marine, and impeccably dressed all the time. I don't think I ever saw a bead of sweat on him. He could play 36 holes on a hot day, and he just looked like he'd stepped out of the house, freshly dressed.
His nickname on tour was Crease, because he ironed his clothes so well, and he'd change shirts at the turn and everything like that. And I was always such a slob. When I was working out there, one of my first days on the job, I had some nice denim slacks, I thought. He said, "What, are you moving furniture today? You're not going to work out here today."
Too bad Elvis didn't wear his shirt that has 82 logos on it. It was a sample shirt to show.
Hogan guy gave me it. It had wing foot on. I thought it was a nice shirt. So you're not wearing that shirt today. And he made me go up in the attic and get a bunch of slacks up there, and he gave me about 15 to 20 pair of slacks. Cost me a lot of money to get them hemmed, though. But he said, "You're not going to dress like you're used to dressing."
He used to, actually, you could start talking about people like John Guston, and you could spend the whole time doing that. But one of the stories about him is he was paired with Palmer in the last round of the New Orleans tournament one time, and several of the members from Birmingham had gone down to watch him play, and it was rainy and just wet as could be. And going off the first hole, Palmer's there sloshing just straight out down the fairway through the puddles, and John was over tiptoeing around the puddles, trying not to get his clothes wet and stuff. And one of the members says, "That's it for John today." Worried about the wrong stuff.
Yeah,
but he was just the best of the best.
Wonderful ball striker.
Yeah, he invited me over to play one time. He said, "Come on out Tuesday there. I've got us a match." And I said, "Who's it with?" And he said, "Oh, don't worry." He said, "I could beat him by myself if necessary." I said, "Well, who is it?" And he said, "Well, just come on out." And that day I got out there, and it was Hubert Green and Mac McClendon. So experiences like that, when I was still an amateur, to be able play with people like that was just quite a good deal.
And the results of that match?
Let's see. Now, I can actually say at my age now, I don't remember all that. I'm sure it wasn't too much either one way or the other. I mean, it was just the fact that we could play them and John's attitude towards that.
I'll tell you some stuff about Charlie. I think he's the best golfer that had more talent than anybody I've played with in Alabama. Back in the day, he was just special. And
sit closer now.
Yeah, and his sponsor got me to go up to the tour school with Charlie up at Pinehurst, and number 2 was closed, and they played number 6, and Charlie set the course record on the course in the practice round, and I can't remember what the score was now, but
it wasn't extremely low, but it was one of the newer courses, and it was different from all the other Pinehurst courses, and I think it was like 68 at that time, but it was quite a different test, and again, it was new, so it didn't have many tournaments played on it. But
yeah, they redid the greens after that event because they were so severe. You'd hit a really good shot in there, and it would roll off the green. You couldn't even stay on the greens; they were so severe.
And I remember one of the things that made that better was that, like in your practice rounds, a lot of times they'll stay away from the better pin placements or the ones they're going to be using. So that's one of the things Elvis was talking about is every one we had, every pin was almost like sitting there on a crest or something, made it a little bit more difficult. But needless to say, that was my best round, and then I kept getting worse after my practice.
But he still, the first day of the event, he actually hit it better than he did when he set the course record, but the greens were so severe he just didn't make any putts. And he still was in. If he did that every day, he would have made the tour that year. But we had a good time up there. It was really good food, and putting on that huge putting green at Pinehurst was just amazing. With 7,500-yard putts, I think he beat me pretty good up there on those greens.
I was known for in the back of Golf Digest years ago on the annual, they would have a lot of listings in the back of the book. Some of them, just about all the feats and stuff. And they had a picture of Rip Van Winkle laying kind of under this tree. And they said it was Rip Van Krenkel. He said, congratulations on getting through the tour school on your 13th try. So, but I did do it a lot of times, and some of them are really close, and some of them weren't too close at all. But I finally got through the tour school when it was in Orlando, and I was living in Orlando and playing the mini tours, and I was kind of satisfied. I was doing good on mini tours, and I wasn't so much pressure as, hey, this is your once a year, the only thing you can play in and stuff. And I got through the tour school down there. We played 72 holes on the Palm course and 72 holes on the Magnolia course. And I played all 144 holes without a three putt, which was kind of amazing on the Bermuda grass greens and stuff like that. And I ended up second in the tour school that year.
I used to talk to Charlie a lot when he'd get back from those schools and ask him anybody hit it as far as you could, and what was the guy up there that hit it so far, hit it over that ditch?
Oh, now see, I don't remember who.
He was in Santa Rosa and sold those special shafts at green.
Oh, Tom Winrow.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Tom Winrow. He was one of the earlier well-known long ball strikers.
He had on his shaft. It was 384 was the number, and he played some event where he just hit a drive on this par 4 for everybody, and he made a hole in one on that hole, so he named it. It was 384-yard par 4, and that
was a long time ago.
That was with Persimmon. was pretty special.
How often did you two guys go head to head against each other in tournaments?
Not a lot.
Not really a whole lot, because he was never near the lead.
Well, I tell you, I won the tournament one year. Charlie had me by 8 shots, and I had
Decatur Country Club.
at Decatur Country Club. My caddy was 10-year-old, my nephew, and I was so far behind. He said, "Elvis, I'm going to play myself to this day. You don't have a chance, so I'm not going to go with you." And I ended up winning the tournament in a playoff with Bob Lowry. And my nephew saw it in the paper the next day, and he said, "I cannot believe you won that tournament." I said, "Well, I got rid of my weight," because he was 10, and I hit a pretty good shot. If I missed the shot, he still thought it was good, and I'd get aggravated at him about congratulate me on a missed shot, that kind of thing. But the only time I ever saw Charlie play on tour, I went over to Memphis with Mr. Burleson, who used to be a pro at Burning Tree and at Athens and at Point Mallard. And we went over there, and of course, he wanted to watch, some of the high-rated players, and I wanted to watch Charlie. So I went out and watched Charlie, and he was playing with Paul Azinger and Hal Sutton. And Charlie's out driving him about 20, 30 yards, and Azinger I never had heard of Azinger, and he had that strong left-hand grip and real short swing. And when we got through, I said, "Charlie, what is that guy doing out here?" And he said, "Well, he gets in the hole pretty good, Elvis." And about 2 years later, he was the leading money winner. But I didn't think he could hold a candle to Charlie, And
Azinger and I were pretty good friends when I was living in Orlando, and he always kind of traveled around in a little travel trailer type thing, and he and his wife would occasionally come over and have dinner with us. They were living in that Sarasota area, and he loved to fish, and I loved to fish. So a lot of times we'd fish together some, and we spent a good bit of time together and played a lot of mini tours down there together. And he was a real good player, obviously, but he didn't develop really till he got out of college. He was known for not being able to hit the ball up in the air very good. I mean, drive it, low and everything. And then when Metalwoods came along, that helped him a whole lot, as far as driving. But he was a really, really good guy, good friend years ago.
Elvis, where did you kind of learn the game and grow up playing?
Well, I started taking lessons at about 8, 9 years old. About once a month, I was playing baseball, and my dad, he said, "You don't have to play, but you're going to learn to hit the ball. You're going to learn the game a little bit." And so I take a lesson once a month, and I didn't want to be out there. I didn't have any interest. Not many kids were playing golf when I started. I had to play with older boys or women even when I started playing. But when I first started taking these lessons, I wasn't interested at all. And my pro with Mr. Ward, he was a tour player at one time. The time I met him, he had the yips and couldn't make a putt at all, but he could really hit the ball well. And he would just get mad. He was an old school. Back then, they didn't have any patience with kids much, and he would basically hit me in the leg with a club to get my attention and tell me, "You little fat bastards, you're wasting my time and your daddy's money." And I didn't like him at all. And but I took a lesson, about 3 or 4 lessons a year for about 2 or 3 years, and then I started having some success with it, and I got to liking it. And if my buddy Rick Sermon hadn't moved into Huntsville to have somebody to play with, I probably wouldn't have played golf. And Rick and I got to be close friends and played about every day we could, that kind of stuff, And then we got to get they had, back then everybody gambled so much that they'd have tonk games in the pro shop in the bad weather, and so we'd start playing tonk like they would. We're pitching the line, and we had all those caddies down there playing back and forth for money. And I spent a lot of times down there with those caddies. It was more fun than being on the real course because they were throwing knives and shooting dice and learning stuff you shouldn't be learning and that kind of stuff. And my dad would be furious. And I'd get a caddy on early in the morning sometimes named Dad. And he could hit Mr. Milton Cummins from Huntsville, one of the wealthiest guys over there. He would back him to play in these black tournaments. And I'd get Dad for a caddy, and I'd play the first hole, and both of us would play number 2. And whoever won the hole, the other guy had to carry the bag. And of course, my dad said, "We're going to get thrown out of this club if you don't start." Back in the day, it was like that. He'd get furious for me doing that. But I love playing with him because he hit it so good. I used to play with a guy named Dillard at Huntsville Municipal, another black gentleman, wonderful golf swing. And I used to go out there and play with him. And they could really hit it. And he had a son that had one arm that was a pretty good golfer, too. I couldn't believe it, how good. In fact, I almost started to quit. Well, that guy, he could outdrive me with one arm, But
you always learn something new with Elvis. I hadn't heard that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't thought of it in 30 years, probably.
He did end up getting his revenge on Milton Ward. And there's so many stories I've heard from Elvis about that. But Milton was always tough on him. But when he was working for Milton years later, Milton had him run to town and do some errands. And one was to pick up his clothing. And he was always really dressed in fine silk.
Let me tell it.
Okay.
He had 6 brand new pair of custom made slacks that were just beautiful, and he had them dry cleaned before he ever wore them. And I was just learning to drive, and I went to the cleaners and I pulled back in his parking place, and he had a station wagon. I left him in the car, and got my clubs, went out and played golf. And I got back from playing golf and came in there and says, "Elvis, what'd you do with my slacks?" I said, "I just left them in the car." And he went out there and they weren't in there. Probably one of the caddies stole his slacks. And so I was back to being the little fat bastard again. And he called the claim adjuster, and the claim adjuster comes out there and he says, "Bro, was your car locked?" He says, "No." He said, "Well, just tell me it's locked and I'll take care of it for you." He says, "I'm not going to start lying now. I can't make a damn 2-foot putt now, so I'm not going to be lying about anything." And so that was the typical thing with me and him. I would get it. I'd get a club off the rack and go out there. We had wonderful soil out there, and I'd hit the only rock on the driving range and put a dent in a brand new iron or something. And he'd tell me to stay out of the pro shop, and just don't come in there anymore and that kind of stuff.
So now you know why Elvis was also always rough on the juniors. He had a...
Well, that's right.
Chris, now you know.
Yeah, there you go.
I treated you the way he did.
I know it.
I didn't treat you rough, did I?
No, you didn't. You did treat some of them rough, but you didn't treat me rough.
Yeah, I did treat a couple of them rough. I had one guy out there. He's a pro now. I can't think of his name. He was at Auburn University course for about a month. He was a nice kid. He was real cocky and had his collar up like Don January used to do. And he's the only kid that wore long pants to play golf and everything. I thought he was a rich kid from the country club. And I wasn't nice to him a little bit. I don't know why. And we ended up being buddies, but I found out he needed help, and I started giving him free lessons. But it was I told him if he'd lose 10 pounds, here I have been fat all my life, and I told him if you lose 10 pounds, I'll give you a lesson. And if he didn't lose 10 pounds, and I started giving him free lessons.
That never worked for you, did it?
No, it didn't work for me.
So Elvis, tell the story about you and Mr. Ward, and I don't know who else was playing with you, and you asked him what he hit.
Oh, okay. We're playing in the heart of day. I was 16 and got to play with Frank. One reason I got into golf, I got to play with some great golfers in Huntsville Country Club. Frank Frank Campbell was one of the best golfers, and in fact, he ended up being a great senior golfer. He worked for a living. He only played like on Saturdays and Sundays, and he could compete with about anybody in the state. And then Bob Lowry was probably one, I know he was the best player in North Alabama. He runner-up in the Southern one year and played in several national amateurs and that kind of thing. And I was just blessed to be around those guys and play with them a lot. And I never did play with Mr. Ward one time at Huntsville Country Club. But I did caddy against him a lot. I caddied for Bob Lowry Sr. a lot. He was one of the best guys that I've ever been around. He was the president of the bank, and I can make pretty good money caddying for him as a kid, 14 or 15 years old, and I'd get a percentage of his winnings, or he'd pay me $5, and I might not make anything for a month, but if I ever hit, it's about winning the jackpot. And I enjoyed caddying for him. But the story with Mr. Ward, where I got to go with Frank and Bobby and Mr. Ward to Sauga. It was Saugahatchee back then, before they had the country club. This is a long time ago. This is in let's see, 61, I think. And so we get down to the second hole when Mr. Ward hit first and hit a good shot. I said, "What'd you hit, pro?" He said, "I hit a Titleist." And I said, "No, what clubs you hit?" He says, "Use your own imagination, son. I don't know how you intend to hit it." And I said, "Well, what do you think I should hit?" He says, "I don't know how you intend to hit the shot." And then I go on, and after 2 or 3 times, the son, it turned in, he told me, "Go ahead and just hit it with your dig, because you're going to fuck it up anyway."
You might hit it a little bit.
And that's the kind of things that happen to me all the time with him, And 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 right after that, in that second hole, now I'm agitated, I'm mad, and took me several holes to get my composure back after that, But that's about. It was like that all the time with him. But and we ended up being great buddies. I mean, it took me to mature a lot before we were buddies, though, And I got to play with, I guess y'all have heard of Sam Bird, and when he started working at, it was Willowbrook. Now it's, what is it now?
Valley Hill.
Valley Hill now. But started out, he was one of the part owners of Willowbrook. And I took a couple lessons from him when he got into town, and because I'd heard of him, reading about golf, and his wife would come out and play at Huntsville Country Club, and I would get to play with Marty Webb, and her name was Ray Bird, and she didn't have a very good swing like Sam did. I mean, she was peculiar, but she could play well. And Ms. Webb was the trophy for the Southern Women's Amateur is named for her. That's how good she was, a Georgia State champion. Mm-hmm. So I got to play with her and Ray Bird, and another lady that was Miss Spencer. Played a lot of golf with me. It's some way I could play on the weekends when I was a kid, at 14. And I got sent into the clubhouse a lot of times for not acting right, And
Imagine that.
They didn't put up with any mischievous stuff, But I tell you a lesson with Sam, him being a baseball player. The first lesson I had from him, he took me out to a tree. Now, I was playing Little League or Babe Ruth by then maybe, and he says, "Now show me how you'd hit the tree with a baseball bat." So you just, you'd hit it, and you wouldn't delay the hit like that. He'd want you to square the barrel end of the bat up with the tree.
Yeah. I use that a lot teaching. It's a phenomenal way to get people to understand what impact is. Most people get their form looks good, but they don't recognize actually what they're hitting and striking. And there's a big difference in having a full form swing motion, yet not striking the object. And it's a lot better when you learn that your impact is an actual moment there that you're trying to achieve with every shot, whether it's a chip shot to a full drive or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Charlie, Elvis has mentioned a little bit about his background. Take us through your progression, how you got into the game and where you learned to play.
Now, I haven't matured as much as Elvis has yet, so it's a little different. But I never had junior golf. I didn't start till I was 17. And my brother had come home from college, and he had just played golf for the first time. And luckily, he asked me to go join him, and we played down at Roebuck. And when I first got into it, I mean, I loved it immediately. And that's when Frank Scheichel and I got together. He was just kind of starting to play, and he would actually come over from Tarrant and pick me up on his little motorcycle, and we'd ride down to Roebuck because I lived probably just a couple of miles from Roebuck. And we'd have 2 golf clubs and 2 guys on the back of this little old motorcycle. And we would probably play 36 holes a day more often than just 18. And we just learned it quickly. I was lucky too that a couple of boys, their names were the Mosier brothers. They had moved to Birmingham. Their dad was in the Air Force, and they were already good players, and they let me play with them, which a lot of times good players don't want beginners with them. And the fact that I could play with them and, learn from watching them too, I developed, quite rapidly. And I always, excuse me, I always felt like I had a long amateur career, but it really wasn't long. It was a whirlwind of 2 or 3 summers there. And I had a really good winning record. And a lot of people don't realize, we had, during the summer, we would have, it was almost like a tour of your club invitationals. Nowadays, the invitationals, a lot of them have been replaced by member guests. They're a little more into the fun and socializing than they are the old metal play golf. But we also had real good coverage from Mr. Phillips in the newspaper, Bob Phillips, and so
Jimmy Bryant.
Yeah. So when I was basically then, it was the late 60s, 68 through about 70. I remember one year, I think I won 10 out of 11 of the invitationals that year, and ended up winning the state amateur down at Montgomery. And my biggest amateur tournament, I won the Dixie amateur down in Country Club in Miami. And I'll probably always have the record in that because they changed it to a match play tournament after I won it. But that was an incredible experience. And so my amateur career, wasn't really long. It just a lot happened in a short period of time.
When you went down to Miami, were you kind of like an unknown player, or had your reputation grown in the amateur ranks?
It would not have been known by anything but local, Alabama. After I won the invitational there, though, I started getting some. I mean, the one in Miami, I got some invitationals on a national level due to winning that. But
you had to be invited to that.
Yeah, like the Son of Hannah and stuff like that. But I didn't really go out and participate much beyond, Alabama, because I was getting ready to try it professionally. So I had one time I did play in the U.S. Amateur up at Wilmington, Delaware, and it was my first experience on really fast bent grass. And I remember I hit the ball fine, but I felt like I couldn't stop a putt within 6 or 7 feet because I'd either go long or short. It was so different from,
Yeah.
Bermuda that we had down here. But then, they did have mini tours going on, but there weren't very, very many like throughout the year. You'd have some down in Florida only during the wintertime when there were enough pros that would come down from the north that worked up there, and then their courses were closed, but the mini tours grew kind of year after year with more and more people playing, and I had pretty good success with that. I ended up winning 5 of the Space Coast tournaments, which were the bigger ones on the East Coast, and probably 15 or 20 of smaller mini tour tournaments. But it was hard to play year round unless you really traveled a lot. I went a couple times out to Arizona and played on some mini tours there. But it was just the tour schools. If you're probably aware of it, but they changed a whole lot through the years. It was a lot of trial and error. That sometimes they would have a local, regional qualifying to get you into the final tour school. Sometimes, I remember one year at Pinehurst, they just had no qualifying. It was like 600 people or more even, all up at Pinehurst playing the different courses. And sometimes they'd try it twice a year. Sometimes, most of the time, it was only one a year. And you felt, at least at that time, I felt like, hey, I got to go, even if I wasn't ready at the time, because you only had one chance for the year and stuff. So sometimes not on your best game when you do go. But like I said, I finally got through when I took a little pressure off myself, living in Orlando, playing regularly, making a decent income. And I felt like, well, I'm still going to have a life if I don't get my card. And that's kind of what you felt like earlier. So, and when I did get on tour, it was quite a bit different then too. You still had Monday qualifying, which was not a bad thing, but you could actually make a cut on a tour event and still not get paid if you were down near the end. They didn't just pay everybody. It did get you in the next week to play, but it wasn't anything like it is now as far as financial. But one of the best things, or kind of stories I really, really enjoyed going back over, is I had my first tournament where Elvis came up to see was Memphis, and I played a practice round. My first practice round on tour was with Trevino, which was quite an experience too. But I had a friend of mine. Well, no, let me back up. I had a caddy that I didn't really know anything about. His name was Squeaky, but it wasn't the Squeaky that was famous. And he wasn't sure that I made the cut because it was really close. And he left after 2 rounds, and I'm there Saturday with no caddy. And I had a friend from Coleman, Alabama, named Doug Hogan. He was up there to watch me, and so he caddied for me. And that started up. The reason I'm telling you this, that he caddied for me a few more times after that, and Doug was he was a character, and so I talked him into going with me out to Texas, where you had like 3 tournaments in a row right in Texas, and I was paying his expenses, and we were rooming together in a motel, and the first tournament I made the cut, and I told him I'd give him 10% of whatever I won, and I made the cut, but I didn't make a check. So the next tournament rolled around. I think it was Abilene, and Doug had a business at home, but he said he really kind of needed to go home. And I said, "Oh, Doug, stay one more week." I said, "I'll give you 20% of what I went." So he said, "Okay," and Well, I missed that cut and then had to go to the next tournament. And I said, Doug, he said, I really need to go home. I said, well, come on, one more week. He said, I told him I'd give you 30% of whatever I win and, paying your expenses. He said, well, 10% of nothing's nothing. 20% of nothing's nothing. I don't know if I can afford 30%. So, anyway, but he was a friend and he did that a little bit and stuff. But it was quite a bit different financially than it is today. And a lot of people talk kind of bad about Monday qualifyings, but that was nothing really bad. If you were playing good, you'd get in. But the big difference is with when they quit Monday qualifying and stuff and all exempt tour, then people were able to lay out their schedules a lot better and kind of know where they were going to be when and stuff. But it was quite an experience to be able to do that. I mean, I can always look back, and some people work all their lives and then after they retire, they play golf. I played golf first, and now I got to work to pay for that.
Well, I know, Charlie, you had a near miss in Hattiesburg, I think, wasn't it? Came close.
Yeah. Well, I think it was ended up fourth at Hattiesburg, and I had the experience I had in Hattiesburg is after the Friday round or dinner that I had made me basically food poisoning, and I was just where I spent most of that night, and I didn't know if I could even play the next day. I was weak, and then I was afraid I was going to be having to go to the bathroom, while I was playing, and it just wasn't going to work out good. But I ended up able to play and had two pretty good rounds on Saturday and Sunday, and I ended up with a fourth place finish. But again, it was nice to look and see some of the names that, like Nick Faldo and bigger name people that were finished below me. It was before he got real famous, but that's one of the kind of enjoyable things of the competition, at any level. Obviously, winning is euphoric, and sometimes that's all you care about. But still, competing and looking at those that you did finish up ahead of makes you feel kind of good.
Could you make more money living in Orlando playing the mini tours than you could week to week out on tour?
Well, I mean, obviously, I didn't make enough on tour after 2.5 years, about 3 years. It wasn't. I got to the point where I ended up now losing my car, and I'd had to go back over and try to get it again. And at that time in life, and I didn't try to keep pursuing that, but I worked in Orlando. I could work and play the mini tours, and then we had our first child and decided to move back up to Alabama, and I went to Montgomery at Maxwell Air Force Base, where I was an assistant, but mostly I was teaching, a lot of teaching there. And then we ended up coming to Terry Pines in Coleman, and my mom and dad both were kind of getting in a tough way physically. My mother had Alzheimer's, and they'd moved back up into Moulton, where she was from, and had couple of sisters, some family there. And that's one reason I wanted to come up to Coleman. I was fortunate to be able to come to Terry Pines and be close to them when they needed some help a lot. And after Terry Pines, I followed a legend at Point Mallard named Elvis Larkin, and of course, he did have a lot of guys that didn't like him up there. So
that's right.
he was tough on some of those guys, but I understood too. I mean, the way they were. But I stayed there about 11 years and retired, and still do some golf lessons and stuff like that. But I did have a couple of things after I was a senior and working at Terry Pines. I got qualified for 2 of the National Senior PGA Championships, which was a very good experience. Excuse me. I didn't do particularly well, but it was those were my only 2 times I played in what's really categorized as a major golf event. But so it was a good experience.
Well, let's talk for a minute about playing with some other Alabama names that people would know. You've already, both of you have talked a little bit about Hubert. Both of you have some Hubert stories that you want to share?
Well, I'll tell you how when I got started. I didn't play a lot of junior golf, really. My first tournament I played in, we had the state junior. The first junior tournament I think I remember playing in was the North Alabama Junior Championship at Florence Country Club, and it was I think I was 15, so that would have been 1960, and they'd had it for years, and I played real well, and I told Chris yesterday I shot a 32 on the front, and we had a rain out. We went in, they fed us lunch, and they were playing Ahab the Arab on the jukebox, and everybody just had a good time with that song. Nobody had ever heard it before. And we went back out, and I shot bad on the front, shot 40 on the back. It was a one-day tournament, and I shot 72, and I won the event. And Judd Stockard was playing in it, who was a pro in that area later on. And first time I ever met Judd, he won the younger age group, and I won the 15, 16 age group. And years later, the next year, they didn't have that tournament. They canceled it. And another guy that made a pro, Chip Enlow, was on there about 4 times winning it. And Greg Lewis, another guy from Florence who was a good player. In fact, he took me to my first tour event later on. He had already graduated when I was a freshman at Florence, and he took me to the Memphis Open. And first time I'd ever seen any of those guys. And I had a ball there. But years later, in fact, it was about 2 years ago, I ran into Chippy Enlow he used to be the pro at the Arsenal, and he worked at Turtle Point, some other places. And I said, Chippy, I want to meet you next week over here and we'll eat lunch. I got something for you. And I had a trophy. It was about 3 foot tall, huge trophy. And I had it all these years since 1960. And so that's 70, 89, too. About 50 years later, I took Chippy that trophy. I said, you've won this thing 4 times. You deserve this trophy, not me. And so they just told me to keep it. So I gave it to Chippy. I think that tickled him. And but Chippy was a pretty good player too. I don't know if y'all know Chippy, don't you? And but the next year they had the state junior at Huntsville Country Club, and I qualified for the championship flight. And my first match I played Mac McClendon. And I played pretty good, and he beat me 3-2. But he was the best junior golfer in the state at that time. And then and I ended up winning the championship. I went in the consolation flight after that, after losing the first match, and I won the championship consolation. Got my picture in the paper for doing that. First time I'd got any kind of publicity for golf. And the only time my mother ever came to watch me play was in one of my rounds. And I can't remember who I was playing, but I had it 6 under through 8. And I had a sprinkler head on 9 and went out in the parking lot and make double. And I was playing Donnie Blanton, who ended up playing for Alabama. And I ended up birdieing 11 to 13, so I'm back to 6 under 13 with a double, and he was even par, and I closed him out at 13. and that's the only time my mother ever came to watch me play. And when I was warming up, I shanked every ball that I hit. I started not even play. I mean, it's the first time in my life I'd ever shanked a ball, and I shanked every one of them. And I did not shake a shot on the course. I don't know what happened or what happened later on not to shake anymore. And, but the next year I went down to, later, they had the first Dixie Junior. Bud Burns started it at Selma Country Club, and the first round I tied Hubert Green for lead with 69, and so I got the next day. Hubert and I played 36 holes together, and he shoots 65, and Matt McClennan ended up second. He shot 65, and I think I shot like 70, 72 or something like that, and I came in like third in the age group. But so I got to play with Mac the year before, and then I met Hubert, got to play with him. And then later that same year, went to Bonnie Crest to play in the state junior, and I get to play with Richard Anthony in the first round. And he, to me, was so impressive compared to Hubert and Mac, because he could hit it just a mile. I mean, first hole I ever played with him. In fact, I played with him at Huntsville in a practice round before the tournament started, and he drives it over a little service road on the number one, about 40, 50, 60 yards from the green, and knocks it in for two. And he hits a 4-wood and almost drives number 18 at Huntsville. And I'd never seen anything like that before. I mean, that's how far Richard hit the ball at that time. Till I started playing some with Charlie. Now, Charlie was just like, he hit it about as far as Richard could. And so the next year when I played Richard, I was a little bit intimidated. He had me 3 down after 3, but I didn't give up, and I ended up getting even with him at 17. And then he ended up, he could get to 18-2, and I couldn't. And he ended up beating me 1 up. And Mac had played in the same group, and he was 7 under. I can't believe I can remember this stuff, and I can't even remember anything. But you don't forget stuff like that it meant something to me. And Mac was 7 under through 11, the closest kid out, whose dad was in the Air Force at Maxwell. And so I went into Constellation again. I got into Constellation. I only played in 2 of those tournaments, but and Richard played Mac that afternoon, and Mac had he'd won like 2 or 3 straight state juniors, and Richard was 1 down at 17. He had and Mac had about a 1.5 2 foot putt to win the match, and he kept talking to. I think they were pretty close at the time because Richard from Andalusia and Mac from Montgomery, and I think they played a lot of stuff together. And he kept, asking him if he's going to give him that putt and stuff. And I think he wasn't concentrating. He missed that putt. So it went to 18, and Mac couldn't get to 18, and Richard could. And he ended up beating him on that hole, and they go into sudden death, and Richard upset him. And I thought that was kind of a.
Charlie, I want to get to you in just a second, but I want Elvis to tell the story about Hubert picking on Ricky Sermon.
Oh yeah. Well, I'd lost my eligibility to play in the state junior. I guess it was 2 years later, and they were having a match out there at Huntsville Country Club. It was back there again, and Hubert's playing with Tom Jones, who was from Valley Head, Alabama, and he was a really good golfer and played. In fact, he played on the Alabama golf team and played. He's the last. One of the last white guys that I remember played center at Alabama in basketball. He was about 6'6", and another friend of mine, Bill Lowe, was playing. He was from Huntsville. He was in the group, and I can't remember the other guy, but Hubert had been picking on Ricky all the day. Ricky was a late bloomer growing up. He was about 4 or 5 playing at 14, 15 years old, but he could still score really well. Couldn't hit it very far at that time. And I don't know why Hubert was picking on him, but he was. And Tom told him if he didn't leave Ricky alone and quit trying to pull rules on him, he's going to stick him in his golf bag. And after that, Hubert left Ricky alone. But Hubert, I wasn't around Hubert that many times, but I played golf with him. Every time I played with him, it was in a tournament, and he was he had so much intensity, and we're playing in the Huntsville Invitational one year, and we're not in the last group. We're in the next to the last group, and we had a delay on one of the holes. I think it was on 16 tee. We're waiting to tee off, and I said, Hubert, how you think those guys back there playing? And he just jumped down my throat and said, that's your damn problem, Elvis. He says, you worry about something you have no control over. Worry about what you're going to do, not what those guys are doing. And I mean, that's how, every time I was around Hubert, he would get on me like that about something,
I think a lot of Hubert's situations was his sense of humor. I mean, he thought something was funny, but it never came out funny to anybody. It was always
that's right.
Like insulting them or just didn't like the way it came out.
That's right. Yeah, I'll tell you, Chris, yesterday, I've never, talking about other golfers too, I've never, Hubert's ball, when it rolled, it was just different. I mean, it was just wonderful rolling the ball. And MC Fitz from Tuscaloosa was just like him. He was one of the best putters ever. In fact, Arnold Palmer came down to Tuscaloosa to take a lesson from him. So you had to really think a lot of his ability to roll the ball. And another guy, old timer named Dick Klein, he was just an unbelievable putter of the ball too.
Hooked it.
That's right. A little short.
Alan Dole rolled the ball like that.
Yeah, Chris, we were talking to him yesterday.
The putter never goes back further than this, no matter how long the putt is. And it just.
That's right. That's what Dick did too.
Amazing.
But Hubert was. I saw him over at the Memphis Open one year, and he's on the putting green, and he came over and said, "Hey, Elvis, when'd you get out?" And I says, "What do you mean get out? When'd you get out of jail?" And everybody just looked at this bunch of people around, and he embarrassed me like that every time I was around him. And I had a little junior golfer that when they started having the senior event in Birmingham named Bobby Huffman, and I said, "Will you see old Hubert? Tell him to hello for me." So Bobby, he's about 14, and Daddy takes him down there, and he goes down there and he sees Hubert. He goes over there, Mr. Green, my golf coach, Elvis Larkin, told me to tell you hello. And he said, "Oh, who are you, his son? You're short and fat, just like him." And embarrassed old Bobby, and that kind of stuff. But that's the kind of stuff that he would do all the time. And the last time we saw him, probably was we went down to see Kenny Knox at Ross Bridges. Mm-hmm. And Hubert, we were down there watching Kenny practice, and Hubert came over and talked to us, and he was
a little better than.
Yeah, he was nice. Yeah. He said, you got two pros trying to help you, or something nice for a change, And Hubert went over by himself hitting balls, and I went over there watching some, and he was going through cancer with his throat, and I said, "How you playing, Hubert?" And he said, I can't play. I'm just out here trying to keep my insurance." And I don't understand that, but he was just hitting just the hybrid. He didn't even have his bag with him, but he was just kind of going through the motions, and he still shot like 69 or 70 though in the tournament. I mean, he could still play even when he was he just knew how to play golf. It's just another story with Hubert. I was working at Birmingham Country Club, and he's out on the West Course putting green practicing his putting, and I go up there. I just want to watch him putt. I just never seen anybody roll the ball like that, And he just quit putting. And I said, "Hubert, hit some putts." He said, "I'm at work, Elvis. Don't you have some clubs to wash or something?" So I go back in there and just get away from him, But that's the way he was. But I tell you, one time he was nice to him. He missed the cut at Memphis one year. I must have gone to Memphis a lot. But he missed the cut, and he said, "Elvis, would you do me a favor?" And I said, "Sure." He says, "I'm not that far off." He said, "Would you come down there watching me hit about 20 balls?" I don't want you to say a damn word. I get through. I don't want no advice or anything. I just want you to watch my head. And so I did. And I don't want you to make any suggestions. And so he had about 20, 30 balls. And he said, what is my head doing? I said, it's dropping down about that far, about 6 inches. He says, thank you. We're going to Westchester next week, and I have a good chance on that short course up there. Daggum, if he don't go up there and win the tournament. And so I guess, but he,
was that the year he won 3 in a row?
I think he won 3 in a row after that.
Tough course, Westchester, Jacksonville. I forget where the other one was.
That's right. And
was it all to Elvis?
Oh yeah, well I didn't have anything. I didn't say nothing. But the year they opened up Show Creek, Hubert and Jerry Pate and John was supposed to play with him, and I do not know why he don't play. I can't remember. And playing with Nicholas in open ceremonies, and Hubert was in the pro shop that morning, and Mrs. Anderson, one of his mother's best friends, was in there and said, Hubert, good luck today. Go out there and beat Big Jack. Well, Hubert can't say thank you, Miss Anderson.
No.
He says, why don't Jack come out there to try to beat me today, or something like that, just. And about 10 people in the pro shop, everybody just kind of looks away. I mean, that's the way Hubert would do. I mean, he just couldn't, like Charlie said earlier about it, he would do stuff like that. It was just, but I really respected Hubert's game. He was just special.
Well, Charlie, you got some Hubert stories you want to tell about playing with him or being around him?
Yeah, a couple of things. Again, I think a lot of it was what he thought was humorous is not humorous, didn't come out that way. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time around it, but one of the stories I like about him was, he was doing really good on tour and Mac was struggling compared to what everybody thought Mac would wear him out on tour. But Hubert was the one that was winning. And in the old team championship down at Disney World, Hubert and Mac were playing together, and Hubert, in his mind, he's trying to help Mac, win money and do better and stuff. And there was this long par 3 out there, and Mac was just fixing to tee off, and the green didn't have any real patrons around it. It was roped off, but there was a marshal that was behind the green, and this was like 190-yard shot or something, and Mac's getting over the ball to hit, and he looks and he sees that marshal just kind of walking a little bit back and forth, and he steps back and says, what in the world is that marshal doing back there, like that? And Hubert says, Mac, you got to ignore that stuff. You shouldn't even notice that stuff. He says, you just go through your process and hit the ball. And Mac gets up there and he hits a beautiful shot up there about 10 feet from the hole. So it's Hubert's turn to hit, and Hubert gets over, and he's doing his pumping. Hubert's pumping. Then he says, Mac, what is that guy doing back there? So, but he wasn't all bad, and I felt like he was probably one of the top 3 best golf minds that ever played, ranking right behind Nicholas and whoever else. But he had the mind that was, knew how to win, knew how to get in the hole.
And he was definitely one of the top 2 or 3 chippers ever.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody, I mean, I took Matthew Moorhead up to watch the senior event up in Nashville. And when you came off the practice tee, you went to the chipping area. And we sat there and watched a bunch of guys chipping up there. And nobody, where they came in, if they were like at the end of the chipping area, and it was sloping downhill a little bit, and nobody was getting to the first pin within about 8 or 10 feet. Hubert gets up there and sets that angle so quickly and like that, and he's stopping up there just like that. Wasn't even a contest compared to what everybody else was doing. And he just had it.
He did show me a couple of shots. I can't replicate them in here like that, but he did give me a couple of ideas on some shots, one in the bunker and one just short chipping right off the edge of the green. in a situation where it's almost impossible to stop the ball, things like that. But one of the people we hadn't mentioned that needs to be mentioned is Sam Farlow. And Farlow, y'all both know how good he really was and stuff. I played a lot with Sam. A lot of those games over at Birmingham, and he was always there playing. He had already been on tour and off, but most people, which is kind of true, Sam was had more rather worried about betting than tournament play. I mean, he enjoyed. They'd say that even on tour, sometimes at the turn he might run place a bet at the night between 9 and 10 instead of focusing on his golf. But what a great golfer and a good guy he is. He's we used to just go round and round out there a lot with our games and stuff.
First time I ever played with Sam was at Birmingham Country Club when he was 14. I was 16. I got paired with him in a JC event down on the East Course. He had it more solid than about anybody I've ever played with. I couldn't believe at that age how well he hit the golf ball.
He could launch the ball so high, which very few of us could do. He could take a 3-iron and just shoot it up like a wedge for us.
I got to play with Hubert and Sam in the state amateur at Turtle Point, and playing. And on number 2, I guess y'all have been to Turtle Point, and Hubert and I were hitting drivers to that hole, and Sam had 1 or 2 iron up there, and the pin was on the right side. It was all carrying up there, and just straight. He get higher than I said my driver. I just line drive it compared to up that hill compared to Sam. It's awesome.
Listening to y'all, all these names you're bringing up, there's been a lot of good players in this state, but at that point in time, do you feel like that was the best players this state has had at one time?
Hubert by far.
Yeah, Hubert, Sam, Mac. I mean, obviously they were great players. Some of the guys that mentioned earlier with up in Huntsville, they were both great players, but they were a good bit older than us when we were around them. And you can tell watching somebody can 60 to 70 years old can still play golf pretty good. They've been able to do it a long time. And Selma had always had some great golfers, Mike Smith, and I think that Donnie Blanton wasn't he?
He was from Selma. I'll tell you another Hubert story. My buddy, one of my best friends ever, Lee Harper. Well, we used to go to every tournament together. We were really close. And Hubert, I can't remember if it was Lee played in the Open and the PGA, and I can't remember which one it was. But since he was pretty close to Hubert, he got to play with Hubert in a practice round with him and Fuzzy Zeller and Hubert were best friends. And so he got to play with both of them, and they had a 1-ball row. And Fuzzy and Lee played 1 ball, and Hubert played 3 or 4. And everybody was aggravated, so they ended up finishing way before Hubert. And when they got through, Lee asked Fuzzy to come down and watch him hit a few, maybe give him some tips. And he said, "Okay, go down there and warm up. I'll be down in a minute." So Hubert came down there, and he had 2 Tom Collinses and a graphite driver. And this is back when it was just persimmon. And he says, "Lee, I don't know what you're doing. All I do is get up there and hit it. I don't think very much. And there's no way I can help you the game. I just know you don't hit it far enough." And he pitched him that graphite driver and a Tom Collins. "Here, relax and have fun."
Charlie, this may be wrong, but it seems like I remember a story about you playing against Raymond in a little match. Maybe you and a couple other people. Is that right?
That was right. It was very memorable. Got an opportunity. A good friend of mine from Miami. He was a good player. He was a club pro, and he liked to play a lot of tournaments too and gamble and stuff. But he called me one day, and I was in Orlando then, and he said, "Would you like to come down? I got us a good game. Get a chance to play with Raymond Floyd." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'd love to." And Raymond, the connection was a friend of Raymond's was a guy that he was a pro, but he wasn't a real good player. And I think his name was the same as the writer Feinstein, John Feinstein, I think was his name. But he was friends with Floyd. And so we were going to play, my friend Gary and I were going to play Raymond and Feinstein. And the first day, we're at Raymond's home course, which is called Indian Creek. And it's basically a little bitty island just not far out from down there around just north of north of Miami. And it has like 26 homes around it. And we got started and we got rained out a little bit. And Raymond just said, "Hey, let's go over to the house and get out of this rain." So we got to go in Raymond's house, and the first thing I noticed when we went through the garage is one whole wall is full of zebra putters. I mean, there's like had to be 200 zebra putters up there.
Wow.
All this stuff, and he showed us around his house, which is really nice. And then got back on the course, and the first day Gary told me when I got down there, he said, "Now he's going to want to play us individually, and he'll give us a stroke or so." And to me, getting one stroke from Raymond on his home course is not really a great gift, but that's what we were doing. And we weren't playing for big numbers. It was like $50 even betting us two against them two, and 50 on individuals with Raymond and Gary individually. And the first day we broke pretty much even, and it's mainly because Gary and I played pretty good, and that other guy John didn't cut Raymond one stroke. So Raymond enjoyed it because most anybody plays with down there, he's got to give them 6, 7 strokes, or 9 holes, that type of stuff. So we were invited back next day to do it again, and we played 27 holes. And I remember I was getting a stroke aside, and I shot like 33, 34, 32, plus getting a stroke each 9. And I beat him one bet. And the 2-man team, we had them up about, with all the pressing and things, we had them up several $100s coming to the last 2 or 3 holes there. And again, that guy John hadn't cut Raymond one stroke. So Raymond's playing our best ball, basically, and we're both playing pretty good. And we got there to 16, he birdied 16, not too hard a hole. And 17 was a par 3 that was a little over 200 yards, and the small green pin up in the back. He hits him some kind of laser 3-iron back there, about 10 or 12 feet, makes it for birdie. And then all the money was riding on 18. And it was par 5, and we were all up there, reasonably close to the green. And my partner had a birdie wrapped up, and he had like a 12 to 15 footer he had to make to tie the hole, but to keep us from winning about $400 or $500. He finished birdie like there's nothing to it, and he was enjoying it. But that was really a enjoyable learning experience, playing with him. I did ask him how he got his kind of loop in his swing.
Or hitch.
And he told me that when he was first out on tour and playing, and you see old pictures, he had this long flowing swing like most people. He said, but when he won, Doug Sanders was winning a lot. Doug Sanders was a big partier, that they partied a lot together. And he said, I went out and tried to shorten my backswing because Doug Sanders did so good with it. And he said, after a while of taking it back there kind of and stopping it, he said, I decided it wasn't for me. And he said, but I could no longer go all the way back without stopping and interjecting another move into it. Of course, he made it work, but
he sure did.
That was interesting too. And some of my best experiences were not playing tournaments, but were gambling with some folks and stuff. Never did too much, except high numbers. Except I met a person in North Carolina that was liked to bet heavy, and a lot of times the big gamblers, they're not necessarily really good golfers, but they will have a really good golfer as their partner, and you really have to trust your partner. You got to know they're not going to dump you in the river or something because they play for quite a bit, and a lot of your bigger games are like that. And I had a guy became a really good friend of him in North Carolina, and we had somehow he attracted the easiest golf games. One-sided in our favor. You couldn't hardly believe some of them would do it, but people like to gamble, and he knew how to work them too, get up some really good bets. But I don't know if y'all both heard of Leon Crump. Leon Crump was a well-known gambler. He was built like kind of Popeye, had those Popeye arms. And one of the games I had up there, he was my partner, and we were playing two guys that they could play okay, but they weren't nearly as strong as we were. And they both worked at a club up there, but Leon and I were partners playing these two guys for $1,000 Nassau automatic 2 downs, 1 down on 9-18, and double on the back. And I'd never played with him before that day, and we were 7 under on the first 9, headed to quite a defeat with them, and we beat them a couple more bets on the back 9 and stuff. But it was just one of those things that these guys can't win, but the guy that's backing them, he had plenty of money, like to gamble. But had some great experiences up there.
Leon came to Birmingham, and they played at Birmingham Country Club in Farlow, and they brought in Ren Lum from Mobile to come up and play with Sam. And I hard me to believe that he beat them, but he beat them at Birmingham. Then they came out to
quite a gambler.
And they came out to Pine Tree, same thing. And he never had. And I went out and watched the match, and somebody had never played the course like that and putt like he did on that course was impressive.
He could make a putt when he had to, as good as anybody I've ever seen.
And I got to play some guy that was, I guess, was putting up a lot of the money was Freddie something. Well, he was a bookie from Mobile area, and I can't either. But what was amazing, they had a big sack of money, and they were paying off a lot after different holes and stuff. They didn't go the whole match. I guess I don't know what they were playing for either. But he was something. Take a golfer.
I think there's one thing, I don't know how close y'all are to the end of this, but one thing I think's worth mentioning about how golf, we all know it's a game for a lifetime, and it's something that you just never know when it's going to happen. But the experience I have with this great golf writer there, Greg DeWalt, you got to mention our round at Tuscaloosa.
Yeah,
not because it was a good round, but because of what happened.
The most read story on AlabamaGolfNews.com for a while. I guess did we play the back 9 first, and then
we played the back first.
And all I know is we at Old Colony, nice little municipal course. And I should let Charlie tell it and see how much he embellishes it. But
I don't have to embellish it. I mean, because I wasn't playing good. I mean, we were just playing, and it wasn't real. I wasn't playing good at all. But we made the turn, and I think it's the third. I believe it's the third hole. Could be the fourth. Par three, roughly 150 yards, and it's got a pretty severe slope from right to left. And I hit an 8-iron up there, and I pushed it and hit it up on the edge of the green to the right. But before I get there, John Gray was playing. He was the pro there at the course. My brother playing Greg, and what's that guy's name?
Joel Goose Gafford.
There were 5 of us.
Joel.
Yeah. And when my ball, I pushed it out there, and I was turning my head and disgusted. And the pro there, John, said, that may end up all right because it comes on down. And the ball's just trickling down. It's not like, it just keeps trickling, and getting better and better. And it looks like it hits the stick, and you can still see the ball. And we get up there, and the reason you could see the ball, it was in the hole, but it had the styrofoam. It was during COVID. So it had the styrofoam in there, and you could see the ball. But so it was a hole in one. It was my 9th hole in one. And we played 2 more holes, and we get to this par 5, and the green is down kind of, you can't see the green, you can't see the pin from where our tee shots, but it's in a little bit of a gully this way. And John said, you need to aim right at this pine tree that's directly behind the center of the green. And I did hit a really, really good 3-wood. It never left that pine tree. And we're all down there starting to go to our next shots. And I'm looking, I can't see my ball on the green, which I was hoping it would be. And I get up close to the green, and I looked up the hole, and I couldn't see the ball. So I figured, the ball's not in there because styrofoam would hold it up. And I'm looking in the bunkers all around it, and everybody else is hit, and we can't find the ball. And so I went on up on the green, and sure enough, there was no styrofoam in there, and the ball was down in the hole for a 2. So I never had a 2 on a par 5, and I was 71 then, I believe. And to play as long as I have, and you just never know when something's going to happen. I did realize that I'd never have any more luck after that on the golf course. That has been very true. That's come out to be true.
I wish I could have. I tell you what, I played with Charlie one day at Pine Tree, and we played it from the tips, and he had it about 10 under through about 12 down there. Remember that?
Sounds good to me.
We ended up, he got mad, though, and had to quit. It happens before, too.
Rich Sandaga didn't know a golf course had 18
I know it
for a long time.
Yeah,
He's
right. Yeah. You're talking about other golfers a while ago. Mike Smith was one of my favorite guys to play with. He was so much fun. I just loved his game. He was so relaxed and loose. And, one of the best shots I ever saw, we were playing in the Turtle Point Invitational, and he on 18, we weren't going to win the tournament. And Mike gets up there, and I never seen anybody even try to drive the green. He just knocked it up for about 15 feet and 2-putted for his birdie. But I'd never seen anybody go for that green back then.
Mike Smith and I played together in the 2-man team at Disney one year, and we didn't get do real good close to winning it. But what I remember about that, the last 4 holes at the Magnolia were pretty tough, and that day I did birdie 15, 16, 17, and 18, our last 4 holes, and that was a big stretch because those holes down there were pretty long. I don't remember being quite as long as Elvis says, but
he was.
I'm going to trust his memory better than mine.
Okay, Elvis, tell us
Lee,
your buddy story.
Lee and I are, I was living down in Orlando, and we played in a couple tournaments, and we went out. Charlie went with us. We go out to the Bay Hill to see the Bay Hill tournament. And Lee, Charlie wasn't with us when we followed Buddy, but we got on this one hole. I'll never forget it. It was one of the longest holes out there. And he's playing with Bobby Wazell. You might have heard of him. And some other guy, I can't remember who he was. And Lee and I were about 20 yards in front of the tee. And that ball hit, and we both looked at each other and said, what happened to that ball? It just got out there about 250 yards. It just jumped, it looked like. And Bobby Wazell, he threw his driver down and said, what happened to that ball? And so we get on down there, and they're hit. Bobby Wazell and the other guy hitting about 5 irons in the green. And Buddy's got like a 40, 50-yard shot in this green, and we've got this crosswalk down there. And the guy said, what do you do, get in trouble off the tee? And says, no, it's his tee shot. He's bullshit. I've worked here 15 years. Anybody been within 100 yards of that ball? I don't know what happened to that thing, but that's the kind of talent Buddy had at times. It's just amazing how far that he could hit a golf ball at times.
Mm-hmm.
Impressive.
Yeah.
I told Chris yesterday, playing at Birmingham on the old course, and before they renovated, he almost, it seemed to me he was almost pin high on number 2, and I just couldn't believe it. Of course, I know he pulled it, and it rolled, and
it's still uphill.
It's still uphill. It's just impressive. And a great guy. I just think the world of Buddy.
Yeah. While we're waiting on Charlie to step back in, tell you a story about qualifying for the National Amateur and you and Bubba.
Oh, okay. Well, I went up to Nashville and qualified up there at Belle Meade, and because I went up and caddied for one of the assistant pros at Huntsville that was from Texas, and they wouldn't let me play a practice round. I loved the golf course. It was a kind of course I really liked, and so I went up there to play there instead of Willow Point. And Bubba Majors qualified, and Lynn Wallach, 2 good players, Birmingham and Montgomery. And we get out there, and I get out there, and it got off the plane. I see Bubba, and it's about 30-mile trip into Portland. And I said, Bubba, you want to half a cab, save some money? And he said, sure. You want to spend the night together tonight? And I said, sure. Save money. And this guy from California heard us talking. He says, can I share that cab with y'all? And we said, sure, save money. So we get out there, and on the way to Portland, the guy pulls in his cemetery. He said, I want y'all to meet some of my friends. We didn't know what in the world was going on. So he just drove us around the cemetery on the way to the hotel. So he pulled where we were going to go. And the guy from California, I'm not riding with him by myself. Can I spend the night with y'all in y'all's room? We'll split it, which is sure. So we did. And so the next day we get to the golf course, and I think I played. I don't remember if it was before or after play, but I went and see the pro in there, and somebody at the desk, and I says, could you recommend a place I can get a room from? And the guy says, where are you from, Alabama? And I said, yep, I'm from Alabama. He said, well, I said, why would you say that? And he said, well, you're the second guy today that came in looking for a place to stay. And I said, who was that? He says, Bubba Majors. And I said, okay. And he said, well, you know, we have Red Skelton in town with the VFW National Convention, and this amateur, and Portland's not that big. I said, you probably ain't going to find a place to stay. You might have to stay with me. I said, well, see if you can find a place if you can. If not, I will. I'd love to. And so he found me a place, and it was a place that had 30 rooms and best restaurant in Portland just about. It's so expensive, it wasn't even funny. And here I am, I can't stand to wear a tie, and you had to wear a tie to even eat breakfast and that kind of stuff. It was just wasn't up my alley at all, but that's where I stayed. And during the tournament, I played real well in the tournament, made the cut. And every time I saw Bubba, he 3-putted. And but I didn't see Bubba. We didn't have anything to do. We didn't run together. But I was so lucky. Albert Jemison from Birmingham, who was really a great player, and he was brother-in-laws with Bob Lowry, and he took care of me up there. He was at that time he was the secretary of the USGA, and he was the starter the first day. And I don't remember who I was playing with, but he says, Elvis, you're going to see some good golf today. Vinny Giles and is playing in front of you. And I said, okay, well, good. I might see him hit some shots. And some guy playing with him was out driving Vinny Giles about 30, 40 yards. When I'd see it, I didn't know who he was. When we got through it was, I didn't know who that guy. And I said, Mr. Jemison, who was paired with Vinny Giles today? It was Tom Watson, and I didn't even know who Tom Watson was back then. And but that's who it was, and he was just impressive. And there's a guy from Cincinnati that Mr. Jemison got me a practice round with called Ed Meisner, and he had played in 37 USGA events. And I got to play with him and Gary Cowan from Canada, 2 practice rounds. And if I hadn't played with them, I would not have made the cut. They helped me out of the rough. And Mr. Meisner, in '54, when Arnie Palmer won the National Amateur, he beat Meisner in 20 holes in one of the rounds to advance. Wow. And he couldn't have been any nicer to me. I couldn't believe it. And after the tournament, and Sports Illustrated had an article in there about it was the youngest field in the history of the USGA Amateur, and said it was an unusual field. Said they had 2 airplane pilots, Air Force pilot, a plumber, and 2 guys from Alabama named Bubba and Elvis. And so that's the only time I've been in sports. Sports Illustrated.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I hope we can do this again. I know there's still more stories to be told, but I also know that it's almost Elvis's lunchtime, so we got to keep him fed. We'll let you tell the Sam Snead coming to Huntsville story next time we get on here, Elvis.
All right.
Well, we enjoyed it. Thank you so much, both of you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thank y'all.
I want to thank Elvis Larkin and Charlie Krenkel for being our guests this week on the Cart Barn podcast. They shared a lot of good stories, and we hope to have them again next time so we can hear even some more deep dirt on their time playing golf in Alabama.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next week on the Cart Barn podcast.